Hi, I'm Dawn Kutu, and I am here with, oh, Vicki Blanchard of Noki Pottery, and we are here in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. So stay tuned. So we are also going to be joining with Carol Lake of Carol Lake Studios in Canterbury, New Hampshire. And we're going to discuss Abenaki sculpture, wild clay, all that fun stuff. And this is made possible by a grant from the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. So just bear with me a moment as I get Carol Lake in on the call here. So feel free to add a comment. Where are you guys joining from today? Are you in New Hampshire, Vermont? Oh, nice. We have Chris Nelson joining from Vermont. Looks like we have Jennifer Davis here from North Central Mass. Where else? Thank you guys for your patience. Just Carol Lake is at her right now, so just trying to get her tuned in here. Vicki, do you want to start telling us about some of your pottery?
Sure. Am I on camera or are you on camera? I am?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Vicki, and I'm here in Hillsborough. And as an Abenaki person, I learned about some pottery over COVID, actually, during the 2020 when we were kind of stuck at home, and had done some research and had there was the beginning of Abenaki Trails, and we had gone to the library, not the library, the Historical Society over in Hopkinton. And while we were there, I saw some pieces of pottery shards, and when I learned that they were found right in Hopkinton, it was just like and my brain went off like, oh my God, like my ancestors were potters as well. And so it started me on this journey I'm on now, on trying to recreate the pottery that my ancestors would have made. They would have gotten their clay locally, which we have found local clay, and made their pots and fired them in a fire pit, and then used them for either cooking or storage mostly. Oh, yeah, I'm holding this little ball of clay here in my hand. This is a piece of ball of clay that I made when I was about 10 years old. I found it in the clay in the brook out behind my house, and
How big is it?
it's the size of my, I don't know, maybe an inch and a half in diameter. It cracked in half over the years, but just the fact that it survived all this time, and even as a 10-year-old I was playing with clay. And I just have a piece of it, and it's kind of fun to look at my little fingernails, like, know that that little girl made those, made that. And so now I've been, like I said, I've been trying to work on making my own pots from the clay, and actually I can reach over and grab a piece of clay. Yeah.
Sure.
Here's some clay that is a local clay from the pond just up the road from me, which we dug out of the beach. You have to dig down under the sand, and it was about maybe 10 to 12 inches under the sand. We found the clay, and
Yeah, that's kind of down there a little
Yeah,
bit, right?
yeah. I do know the road agents in all the area towns, and I've asked them all to, when they're out digging, if they find any clay, to let me know.
Nice.
But my goal is to take this clay and fire it, just like my ancestors would have, and make the pots the same way that they have done them. So,
And did you say that you have an example or two?
of
Are they upstairs?
oh no, these here you mean that I brought down?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We have some examples coming.
Sorry. So this is one example of one of the pots that I fired in the fire pit. It did end up cracking because I got it too hot too quickly.
Oh.
But this is,
Can you show us the bottom that has the crack?
oh, where the crack is. I don't know if you can see
Yeah.
the crack. Can you
Just
see it?
like
Yeah.
right along there.
Yeah. And so now this is a new one that has not been in the fire pit yet, that will go in the fire pit, and hopefully it won't crack. And then eventually I have some big one. I don't know if you want to grab one of my giant ones. I'm experimenting with the smaller pots first, because these don't take too long to make, but I've made this big one here. I don't know if you can see, is that in view?
It is, yeah.
This one was all hand coiled, and
Yeah, let's take a little bit closer look at it.
and the carvings on it are similar to the Colchester pot that was found in Vermont. It's a little grander, bigger than the Vermont one, but it's a nice big pot. I really like it a lot. So, but I want to, like I said, I want to protect the firing process before I put her, and it's a her to me. Don't ask me why, but it's a her before I put her in the fire.
No, that's fair.
So,
Is that true for your other pottery as well?
what do you mean? Is what?
Are they all hers?
Oh no,
Or
I
like
don't
have
know.
a personality?
Most of them don't. Just this one. Most the pots all behind me are commercial clay, and they'll go in a regular kiln. They won't go in the fire.
Excellent. So I just wanted to let people know too. Can you hold that ball up for a second? Yeah. So I'm not sure if you had mentioned it, but you got that clay down by the river, right?
In the brook. Yeah.
In the brook. And
Yeah.
how far is that up the road?
Well, from where I lived, that's about 6 miles from where I am right now. So where I lived as a little girl is about 6 miles away from here. But that brook water runs right in front of my house here now, that brook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So super local clay.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what we're talking about when we say wild clay. And when we were talking a little earlier, I was asking you a super obvious question about is this clay you found by the brook Abenaki clay?
And I said yes, because this is what we call Indakana, which is our homeland. And so yeah, they would have just dug it locally wherever they were at. They would find it. Usually, it was a woman's work to make pottery. I learned this from Bob Goodby, who has been a great resource for me in helping me to learn about the Native American pottery. But yes, it would have been local clay. And like I said, I know here in town, there's in Hillsborough, many of the lakes have clay in them. It's just a matter of finding the veins of clay.
Oh, wonderful. So here's another question for you, Vicki. So assuming most clay items were either utilitarian or ceremonial, were any clay pieces used for decoration or as jewelry?
I would say probably as in some beads, as probably some beading before the trade beads came over. I know they use shells as well for jewelry. And as far as decorative, the original pots were very plain. And then this big pot that I had showed you with the like the big crown on it, as the French and English came to America and to our land, they brought with them other pots that were much more durable. Obviously, the pottery broke, and so they started making them more decorative to help with the trade industry.
So would you say that this piece beside you is a more decorative piece?
Yes, very much so. The original ones were very plain, and they might have had some decoration on them. They also were very pointed at the bottom so that they could set them down in the coals or in between the rocks.
Yeah.
And they didn't necessarily have this flat bottom like these. They were more pointed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did they end up hanging them because they weren't able to sit?
No, they purposely made them so that they could set them in the coals, and then that way there was more heat around them. They could get more heat around them.
Yeah. Nice. And then we have another question coming in. Where can I see, either in person or online, examples of Abenaki pottery?
You can look online. Oh boy, I don't have anything. But you can just Google it, or woodland pottery, or woodland era Abenaki pottery is what I would Google, and you can find some pots. Or Colchester pot, Colchester. If you Google the Colchester pot, you can see that pot, and there's a history about having found that pot. They were doing some excavation or something. They found it some roots of a tree, and it was able to survive. So that's kind of an interesting story.
Oh wow, yeah, that is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So how did they find it if it was under the roots of a tree?
I think they were excavating, and it got unearthed while they were doing that.
Yeah.
This was a long time ago, in the 1800s. They found that pot.
Oh wow, that is quite a while ago.
And then if you go to the Mount Kearsarge Museum, they have some pottery. They have one called the Canterbury pot, which was found in Canterbury. Funny that because Carol lives in Canterbury, that the pot was found in Canterbury, and that's an Abenaki pot that was found very local.
Nice. So I guess that kind of ties into the next question slightly. Mm-hmm. Are there any archaeological excavations underway this year in New Hampshire on Abenaki sites? And then who or what entity is conducting the digs, and where will the findings go?
Oh, good question. I know there is some excavations going on up at Pillsbury State Park. I participated in it last summer, and I believe they're going back up there again this year to do some more digging. You have to ask me what the name of the group is. If Sherry was here, she would tell you. We can get that information and get it back to you. But there is a site, and it's the pieces are with the state. Has them, and they're cataloging them. So yes, there is some excavation going on. There might be some up in the North Country too. I think there is one up there, but I know for sure at Pillsbury they're doing one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Ooh, this is something you guys might be interested in. Do you happen to know if the Abenaki made clay figures as toys for their children?
I don't know the answer to that. If I haven't seen or read about any toys, so I guess I don't know the answer to that question.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that ball that you made when you were younger, that would count as a toy.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. Could be.
So you can really get creative with those. Now, what material did the Abenakis use to decorate and embellish their clay pieces? That's if there were any embellishments. And were there common designs or symbols used?
So the design you see on the big pot is very common with the slashes in the circles. You find that on a lot.
Oh yeah, this
Yeah,
area.
yeah, or even up here. That's very common. You see that on a lot of the pieces. If you were to go see the Canterbury pot, it's similar, but none of them are exactly the same. And if you even just look at any pottery, old pottery, the few hundred years old, all the way down the whole East Coast has a similar hash slashings on it. And how they were done, they would have tools. Some of the tools they would use actually were shells, reeds for the circles, or feathers. If you cut a feather, it'd be circles. Or just clever. A feather like a quill to decorate with. Now these pots, I should mention, are coil built, so they would have rolled the clay. And this clay is too dry right now. Rolled. I'm gonna get a little wetter clay. I don't know if this is gonna be wet enough. Might be too dry. Yeah, it's too dry. They would roll it out in a coil, like a snake, and then they would just coil it round and round and round, and then it gets paddled. And they would the paddles were made and wrapped in fabric sometimes. So some of the old pots have a fabric design to them where you could tell they had been paddled with the fabric. And
take your time.
Yeah. So they would coil them, paddle them. So this one's all coil and paddle, and I paddled it with an I used a wooden paddle for mine, and then they would just inscribe on them whatever their decorations were.
Nice. How did you decide which decorations to use on this pot?
Because I used the Colchester pot. That was the first pot that I saw. And again, if you can Google Colchester pot and you'll find it. That was the first Abenaki pot that I had ever seen, and so I just modeled it after that one.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, a little known fact is that you and I are both part of the Abenaki tribe, right here around the Hillsborough, Concord, Warner area. Can you tell me how you got involved with that?
So it's a Noki band of Cossack Abenaki, and how I got involved with that was through my cousin Sherry. Sherry Gould is my cousin. Our fathers were brothers, and we always knew we were Native American or had Native American in us. It was just through Sherry's genealogy that we were able to prove that, and then I enrolled in the tribe a few years, probably 10 years ago now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so you've been part of the tribe for quite a while.
Yeah.
Have you been doing pottery this whole time too?
I've been doing pottery this whole time, but not the Native American pots, just contemporary pottery, stuff to make for craft shows, to sell at craft fairs. And like I said, it wasn't until COVID and we were all stuck and we went to the Historical Society and I saw that piece of pottery and then it just like put two and two together and I was like, oh wow, that's so it's been my focus for the last couple of years is working on that. So it's a lot of fun.
That's wonderful.
But it's still lots of perfection to go. I was saying earlier that the basket makers and the basket making tradition has been passed down from generation to generation to generation, and the pottery, at least the Abenaki pottery, the last found pieces has been about 300 or 400 years ago, and then once contact was made, and of course the pottery being so fragile, and when cast iron pots and copper came along, the pottery just kind of went to the wayside, and the tradition never got passed down, and so now it's trying to find resources to relearn those traditions.
Yeah. So let's see. Can you describe the process of creating like an Abenaki piece of pottery for us?
Sure. So first you're going to find the clay. So the clay's dug up, and then depending on pure clay by itself is not plastic enough, that doesn't have the plasticity to coil it and build the pot. So then they usually will add what we call a grog, or I call a grog, which is sometimes it's a little bit of sand, or sometimes they would break up shells and crush shells up, and it gives the clay some strength. So they would work that into the clay, and then, like I said, they would start with a little pinch pot, what we would call a pinch pot base, and then after they got their base made, like I said, then they just start making coils, and they just add coils on top of coils until they got their pot, and they would paddle the coils so that you couldn't tell. Like this here, you can't tell that these were little snakes going round and round. And then
Exactly.
and then they're allowed to dry. They need to dry out and then they're fired in a fire pit. And they gotta fire them until they glow. Really glow a nice red. The pottery that go in my kiln is a stoneware that goes up over 2,000 degrees, but fire pit you cannot get up over 2,000 degrees with just burning wood. So this is more an earthenware and not a stoneware, and this will go up to between 900 and 1,100 degrees is about where those go.
Yeah, that's impressive.
It's pretty hot. It's pretty hot. So.
Oh, now let's see. Is there anything in particular right now that maybe we haven't covered already that you would like our audience to know about Abenaki culture or pottery or clay?
I guess the thing we talk about is the erasure of our heritage, our ancestors. I even had like my great aunt, and I have my mother's side. She's from Maine, and I have some Micmac in me from Maine. And my great aunt and my great uncles, they even between the two of them, one would say that yes, they were Micmac, and the other one would say no, we're not, because they were shamed. I don't know why they were shamed into it, but there was that whole erasure thing. Or my grandmother would talk about her relatives as gypsies, which was just another term for Indians, but instead of using that, they called themselves that, again, to kind of erase that erasure, which we're learning more and more about every day, which is great and exciting.
So how would you view your work with pottery over the obviously last 10 years, but especially within the last maybe 2 or 3 years, as undoing that erasure of the culture? Like, what do you feel like you're contributing?
Yeah, I think it's exciting. What I really would love to find is some more Abenaki potters, because right now I don't know of anyone that's in any of our 4 bands that is also a potter, to help each other out on redoing this art that's been lost.
Nice.
Yeah.
And have you found that you're interested in maybe teaching others about pottery?
Once I get it perfected myself. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, even a couple weeks ago we were up in Holderness doing the dugout canoe.
Oh, yeah.
And I brought I brought some clay and let some kids make some pinch pots and some little coiled pots. So
and did they get to bring them home with them?
Yeah, I told their parents they're going to dry up and break, so unless you can find somebody with a kiln.
Well, I'm sure that made their day.
Yeah. There was one little girl in particular, she really enjoyed it. She was all excited about it.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. So here's something a lot of us may be wondering, especially when you're talking about how the pots are made in a coiled fashion. Were the Abenaki clay vessels meant for liquids, and or were they watertight?
So they would cook in them. They are not watertight. They're not glazed. So they do seep water. Although for like boiling sap and stuff like that, it was good because it helped, boil it down quicker. But they did
awesome.
cook in them, and they used them for storage as well. So
For dry goods, probably.
yeah, dry goods. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, and they didn't carry them from place to place. Like they would just make them, and obviously a lot of them broke. They're pretty fragile.
Yeah.
So
I believe it. Now, I was wondering, Vicki, if you would take a minute, and I think you've already addressed this somewhat, but is there something that you wanted to add about who you are as an artist and why you've chosen pottery or sculpture as your preferred medium, and maybe any mediums that you practicing with beforehand?
So I don't, pottery's just been I've always just been drawn to it. So I think that it just is part of who I am as a person. Like I said, I got this little ball of clay here since I was a little girl. So I think that just was always in me. And I've taken from the council, New Hampshire Arts Council have received some grants and done some training with beading. So I've done beading as well. And aside from that, I mean, I'm a knitter, that kind of stuff, knitting and painting,
Yeah.
sketching. But pottery's like my passion.
That's wonderful. And if you guys stay tuned, I'll add some pictures of her other pottery pieces so you can view them on Facebook. So stay tuned for that album. So going back to the Abenaki pottery, I know that's like what this is all about. But how would you say your typical pottery process is different from making the Abenaki pots?
So the typical contemporary pots that I have, I use a commercial clay, and they're fired in an electric kiln. And they go through 2 firings, one to bisque fire and then a second one for glazing. Whereas the Abenaki pots would have gone through 1 firing in a fire pit, and the clay would have been more of, like I said, it's more of an earthenware than a stoneware. So
Yeah.
it fires a much lower temperature to get to its temperate that it needs to be.
And to get to the final product
Yes.
too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I'm wondering, what would you like people to come away with from this project?
I think that it's exciting that it's being rediscovered, and we're making pots again the way our ancestors would have made their pots. And like I said, it's something that hasn't been done for about 300 or 400 years. So for me, that's what's exciting, and I hope that people can take that away. That's being done. I mean, it has continued in other areas of the country. Yeah, like I know down in Massachusetts on the Cape, there's some natives down there that have continued the tradition. And obviously out west, you can go out west and get native pottery out there. But for New England, it hasn't been here for a long, long time. So it's exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're doing important work too.
Thank you.
So, no, thank you for doing that. So now I'd like to open this conversation up to questions. So, if you have any questions that we haven't covered already, please just leave them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer them. Oh, I'm just scrolling through the comments here. Now, okay, so Francine here is asking if we can show her samples of the decorations made with fibers or shells. Do we have any of that?
I have. Hold on. This would have been. This one was done with shells. See, this is scallops, and you take the edge of a scallop.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and you just rock the scallop in there. So that would have been with a scallop. Like I said, these were done with feathers. Like I cut
The little circles.
the little circles. I just cut a feather
Okay.
for that. I don't have any with the fabric.
Yep.
That again is something that Bob Goodby has a good example of that. And it was just a little shard. And what he had done was he had taken another piece of clay and did pressed it in, and then you could see it when they magnified it up. You could tell that it was a piece of fabric.
That's
cool.
innovative.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for showing that example. And just remind me who Bob Goodby is.
He's a professor that teaches, I believe it's archaeology, and he just wrote a book. It's upstairs. I can't think of the name of the book right now. But anyways, he discovered the site over in Keene that is about 12,000 years old, an Abenaki site or a Native American site, and has written and studied pottery for years and Native Americans. So he has dug up and been a part of many discoveries. So.
That sounds like it could be an interesting read.
Yeah, it's a very good book.
So you guys, I'll share the name of the book.
Well, Carol painted the cover.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
So there's
Carol
your connection.
I'm sure she knows the name of the book. She's like, Vicki, how can you...
So we'll share that so you guys can look that up if you want. Now let's see. I'm looking for other questions here. So Luke asks, how long do you fire the pots?
Oh, good question. You gotta fire them until they are, it takes quite a few hours until they turn like a cherry. Once they're glowing red, and if you can get them hot enough to even glow orange is even better. And then once you get them really glowing, then what I do is I take boughs. I have hemlocks on my property, so I use hemlock boughs. And then you completely snuff the fire out with a hemlock and just leave them for like 24 hours and let them naturally cool down. So, but that holds that heat in. The boughs hold the heat in and let the pots finish maturing.
Now, when you take the pot out of the boughs, is it still warm to the touch?
Well, you let it cool down until it's just, yeah. I mean, you don't want to take them out real fast because then they could crack.
Okay. So, yeah, that's the whole point of leaving it in for 24 hours.
Yeah, just let them cool off. It's hard. It can be very impatient because you want to get to them, but just let them cool off.
Okay, and it looks like we have about 5 to 10 more minutes, so throw some more questions in the comments, guys. So Chris asks, how long does a fire pit firing take? And then how do you build the fire and place the pot?
Okay, so great question. So when you're making, first you want to start your fire, and you got to warm the earth up, the ground. And so as I don't know, can you see the tabletop?
Yes.
So if the
Yep.
fire is here and you're building your fire and you're going to put your pots around the edges and you're just going to keep turning them
Yep.
and move them a little closer, and you're going to take your time. It could take you an hour of just slowly warming your pots up. And then when the pots are so hot you can't touch them, then you can start moving the coals around the pot, and then you slowly build the fire up over the pots.
Oh.
And it takes it can be anywhere from like 8 to 12 hours depending on, how long to get it hot enough and what kind of wood you're using. I usually try and start it out with some softwood and then I'll move to some hardwood.
Yeah. Can you give examples of each?
Maple, or for hardwood, like maple or birch or oak, something like that, and then pine just to get it started.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's look for some more questions here. Nice. So Janet here is saying she'd love to learn about how you're learning to work with local clay. Is it mostly trying the process out? What has been the most surprising?
So working with the local clay has been very challenging because I've been using the commercial clay, which has, they have perfected the plasticity of it. And so I pay for it, if I pay buying the commercial clay, whereas the local clay is not as plastic, and it's working to find, like I said, to mix that grog in, whether it's a little bit of sand or crushed shells, to get it so that it will coil properly. And that's been very challenging for me, is to get it to be able to coil properly, because it seems to keep breaking on me. And so that's what I continue to work with, is trying to get it more plastic.
Now, when we were talking about the grog earlier, did you mention that you had learned a different technique that you were planning to use? No, maybe I'm thinking about something else.
Yeah.
All right, on with more questions. Dun, dun, dun. Is that all the questions that you guys have? If you have any questions at all, you're welcome to put them in the comments. Again, we have Vicki Blanchard here, pottery artist extraordinaire. If you take a look behind her on one of the shelves, you can see some garlic pots that she was making, and that's just an example of the different types of pottery that she's made. Would you be willing to point to one of them?
So it's a garlic keeper.
Yeah.
It's a little round pot with a little lid.
Excellent. Yeah, so she really has worked with a breadth of different pottery designs.
One of my most popular are my maple leaf mugs. Now the leaf is still on it. What ends up leaving is the impression of the leaf.
Yeah.
And then I will put what is called iron oxide on this, and it'll glaze around it, and then the leaf just pops right out. It's a really pretty mug.
And what color does it turn it?
It depends on the glaze I use. I have different colored glazes.
Yeah.
So, but those are very popular.
Yeah.
And I make a noodle bowl or a rice bowl with chopsticks. I don't have any down here, but if you're taking pictures and put them in the catalog, you can see them.
I will, yeah.
Those are another very popular for the craft shows.
Nice. Oh, nice. And we have another question coming in from Naomi. When you are piling the embers up around the pots, are the hot embers put inside the pots also?
I haven't, and to be honest, I haven't done a lot of this because, again, I just am discovering it now, over the last couple of years. So I've only ever done a couple of the pit firings, although I did meet a man up in Holderness who has had a lot of experience with pit firing, and he has told me that I should put my pots upside down.
Oh.
So I'm gonna try that and see how that goes. I'll let you know. Like I said, these little pots I made these specifically just to test fire with, and I've got a bunch of little ones, so I'll just keep practicing and perfecting it until I figure it out.
Nice. Yeah, I love that you just keep practicing with it, like you said. It's a good way to learn about it.
Yeah.
Now we have a comment from Francine. She says that the pots you made don't seem to be rough, and it seems you must have to crush the grog very fine. Is it dangerous to work with? I'm thinking about breathing the particles.
The grog I actually have is some ground up granite. It's not dusty. It's more like sand. It's very sandy, so it's not. But I do have a mask that I do wear when I'm working with anything that's dusty. So yeah.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah,
good call.
Especially like my glazes. Whenever I'm mixing any glazes, I definitely wear a mask for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the particles are very, very fine and can get in your lungs.
Nice. Chris says, in Raku firing,
Raku, yeah.
Natural materials are packed around the pot, and the different materials add interest to the surface.
Actually, I have some raku right here.
Oh. And then he's wondering, have you considered trying something like that for your work?
So this is raku, and you can see the texture on that. And that was from some leaves and straws and flowers I put in.
Yeah. Can we see the top and the bottom too?
It's got clay. This is just clay. Yeah. And another thing that we do with raku, I'll show you, is carbon trailing. And this pot is taken right out of the raku kiln, and then horsehair is laid on it, and it's hot enough that it carbon trails. So this isn't going to come off. But I love this pot so much because you can see the smoke. See how you can tell the smoke went up over it. But that's all from a piece of horsehair.
That
cool.
is amazing.
Yeah.
So what is it about the raku process that the smoke adheres to the clay?
It's the temperature. So we bring it up. The raku kiln is a gas kiln, and we bring the pot up to its 1,865 degrees. Yeah. And at that particular temperature, it has to be like, it's a very precise temperature, and then when you put it cools down a little when you open the kiln, so it's not at that 1865, but it does cool down a little. But then you take the piece of horsehair and you just lay it across, and it's just so hot, it just burns right into the clay. And like I said, it even captures the smoke, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's
but if
amazing.
you wait if it's too hot, it won't do it, and if it's too cool, you won't. It's like you've got this tiny little period of time to get in there and get the horsehair on there.
Oh, that's tricky.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Wonderful. All right, so that is all the time that we have for questions today. Just to wrap up here, I wanted to thank Carol Lake of Carol Lake Studios. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have her join us today, but this is part of her project, the bas relief sculpture. It's going to be revealed in the center of Kentucky around October 14th, 15th, so stay tuned for that. If you want to follow the progress, just make sure that you like our Facebook page, Abenaki Trails Project, and like Carol's Facebook page as well, and that's Carol Lake Studios. Again, this is made possible in a grant by the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. So, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks on July 15th for our third live stream with Carol Lake herself. Thank you.